Today is April 14th, and on this day in 1980, Judas Priest released one of their landmark albums, kind of the album that helped bring them into the big time. Of course, we're talking about British Steel. You know, that has so many iconic songs on it, and it tends to have a lot of folklore surrounding it. 6 years later, so 35 years ago today, they released what was probably their most controversial album at the time. Probably a couple since then could rival it, but they released the synth-heavy Turbo record. Now, I thought, well, I haven't listened to either of these in 12, 13, 14 years in their entirety. I mean, I've listened to songs here and there, seen Priest live a bunch of times, listened to the live albums. You hear some of these songs on the radio, but I thought, it's been long enough. I'm just going to take an objective listen back to back and see the difference between the two, sort of analyze it, almost like having a fresh set of ears on it, because it's been so long since I've listened to either one from beginning to end. I didn't listen to the bonus tracks. I thought, I'm just going to listen to the original album tracks, see how I like them, see what I thought. So, started with British Steel. Again, for anybody who's a Priest fan, a very iconic album cover, holding it up without the CD jewel case, so there's slightly less glare. The track listing is Rapid Fire, Metal Gods, Breaking the Law, Grinder, United, You Don't Have to Be Old to Be Wise, Living After Midnight, The Rage, and Stealer. Now, at least half of those, probably anybody who's a Priest fan could sing word for word. Rapid Fire, great opening song. Metal Gods, one of my 4 or 5 top Priest songs easily. Breaking the Law, cool song, but it's like so many overplayed hits. Classic rock radio, the tangent for another day. Classic rock radio has really killed that song for me. If I never heard that song again, I'd be happy, just because there are so many other great songs in the Priest catalog. Grinder, really heavy one. United, they were going for an anthem. I think it kind of falls a little short. You don't have to be old to be wise. These guys were still in their early 30s at this point, so yeah, it kind of makes sense. Living After Midnight, kind of their perpetual album closer ever since this came out. Great song. Again, I could probably do without it just because it's been played so many times that it's ridiculous. The Rage and Stealer, The Rage and Stealer, 2 separate tracks. Fun songs. My biggest criticism of British Steel, and this might sound silly, is actually the production. To me, the Priest albums up through the mid-'80s didn't really have great production on them. You hear the live songs, and we're not talking Unleashed in the East that was almost totally overdubbed in the studio. Talking, live tracks when you can find them. They were so much better in concert. The albums really didn't encapsulate what they sounded like, and British Steel just happens to be one of those. Even though there are some amazing songs, it was the lineup of Rob Halford, Glenn Tipton, K.K. Downing, Ian Hill, and Dave Holland on drums. So the same lineup, several years later, 6 years later, like I say, they decided to experiment and change direction, and Turbo was the result. Like I said, this album takes a lot of flack, and having not listened to it for so long, I thought, well, is it as bad as everybody says? Is it worse? Is it better? Some of these songs, my first Judas Priest CD that I picked up was Priest Live, which was taken from the Turbo tour. So a lot of these songs that kind of get a bad rap, I admit I kind of like. Track listing is Turbo Lover, Locked In, Private Property, Parental Guidance, Rock You All Around the World, Out in the Cold, Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days, Hot for Love, and Reckless. Not nearly as memorable in the Priest canon by any stretch. Turbo Lover takes a lot of guff, but it kind of is what it is. It was an anthemic song. Halford clearly wanted to rev things up a little bit, if you'll pardon the pun. Right off the bat, though, the second song, Locked In, locked into my heart, locked into my love, whatever it was. Not a great riff, and honestly, a very cheesy vocal, and it almost sounds like they were trying to capitalize on, this is a terrible term, but panty sprinkler music of the hair metal days. That was just starting to come around, and it's a pandering song, and later on in the album, Hot for Love is too. Hot for Love has a little better guitar solo, a riff, but nothing worth listening to, honestly, and that's terrible, because I love Priest. I've got every album. Private Property, not a bad song, Parental Guidance. The live album, it was a little better. This one, the guitar sound is pretty weak, not a whole lot of synth on it. Rock You All Around the World, now there's your fist-pumping anthem. It's kind of trite, but you know what, it works in this case. Out in the Cold, the slow song with the keyboard intro, actually, for sort of a desperate plea of a song, it's a really good song, Out in the Cold. Highly recommend checking that one out if you haven't. Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days, 80s party song, again, not bad. The closing song, Reckless, decent riff. So overall, I'll say that the production, really funny. I hate most 80s production, but yet it works really well for this album. I understand what they were trying to do. On Turbo, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's not in my top Priest albums by any stretch, but it's also not my least favorite. So, if you were to take half of this album and half of the next one, which was Ram It Down, which also suffered from some of the same elements here, you'd have one really good 45-minute rocker. So, again, thought, kind of listen to them. Both released on April 14th. British Steel, the iconic record, April 14th, 1980. Turbo, less iconic, a lot more experimental, less fanfare. It has its devotees. I'm not going to slam the album overall. I'll just say that it's weaker. Sacrilege, maybe. I don't think British Steel is everything it's cracked up to be either. There are a few weak points. It's not a perfect record, but it's a lot more heavy metal when you think of what metal should be. So anyway, there's my review, or my two reviews for what they're worth. Priest is a band that's so iconic, such great lineups over the years. Hard to tell where to start. I don't know if I would start with either of these, but if you're going to pick one of these two to start with, pick British Steel. It's got the hits you'll know, plus some of the album tracks. Again, production could have been a little better, but what do you do? Interesting little side note, it was recorded in 1980 at Ringo Starr's house, which had been owned by John Lennon previously, and the next year Black Sabbath went in and cut the original heavy metal soundtrack version of Mob Rules there. So kind of a similar feeling, two iconic bands recording in a Beatles house. So anyway, that's all for now. Have a great day.